Now, every day, as millions struggle to survive in Nigeria, and as the government itself battles to get the economy and everything else back on track, the political and electoral systems remain embroiled in allegations of corruption, whilst the politicians are alleged to be engaged in perhaps the most legendary acts of criminal and ethical misconduct by politicians anywhere in the world. But how do you tackle this in a country where many believe that the flame of justice no longer burns bright and that the judiciary is under unrelenting pressure to bend the rules? Can the arrival of a new Chief Justice help restore the crucial issue of trust in this arm of government that is so central to the future direction of Nigeria? Because, of course, after the courts, there is nowhere else to go, is there? Nowhere else, for instance, for the aggrieved parties who feel cheated of victory in the Edo State governorship election to seek redress following what they believe to be electoral violations. And possibly nowhere else to go to resolve the smouldering political crisis in Rivers State and the dramatic, confusing battle for supremacy there. Who can even begin to comprehend how to restore peace in that embattled state without a conclusive judicial pronouncement? Well, to get a sense of how radioactive these multiple crises are that are rising like plumes of smoke over the horizon and spreading across Nigeria, I'm joined now from our studios in Lagos by the president and founder of ANAP Foundation, Atedo Peterside CON, who's also founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank. Mr. Peterside, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's always good to see you and good to have you on air. Let's start by talking about the most recent election in Nigeria, which is the governorship ballot in Edo State. I start with that because I know you've become something of an expert election analyst. What's your reaction to the controversies around that election? Do you agree or disagree with those who say that it puts Nigeria's democracy further under threat?
Thank you, Charles. I think I've already gone public in sense of after the Edo elections. I put out a tweet. I went on to INEC IREV when I heard all the complaints from people who were in the field in Edo State. I went on to INEC IREV hoping that when I look at the result sheets there, I would conclude that, oh, they were just making noise over nothing. But some of the result sheets that I saw there, Charles, shocked me. In an election where the average turnout was 22% or thereabouts, one particular political party, and I'm sure we can all guess which one, was scoring was achieving a 98.5% turnout and results in some polling booths. Worse still, in some polling booths, the total number of votes that same political party got was larger than the total number of voters that were accredited. Now, I don't waste my time blaming political parties. They are not the referee, they are not the umpire. We must hold INEC culpable. INEC, I got my data from INEC. INEC must explain to the nation, ever since the elections in Osun, where INEC came out with credible result sheets on INEC IREV, I went there also. It's as if something has changed. Right from the presidential elections, they went rogue. I hope that INEC will be held accountable. And I'm sorry for the decent staff in INEC, because there's nothing worse than working in a place where half your colleagues have gone rogue, and perhaps your bosses also. That's my comment.
Well, thank you for putting that in perspective. And I know the documents you're talking about, we actually have them. they're just being uploaded at the moment. As soon as we get them, we'll put them up. But as we wait for that to come out, as you mentioned, after that election, I also noticed that you put out a tweet that was seen by more than 400,000 people, in which you described that ballot in no uncertain terms as a sham. I mean, just tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the reasons I gave. How can you have an election where one particular political party scores more votes than the total number of those accredited? That cannot be an election. There's no use saying, oh, this happened, or that all the parties rigged. I did not find a single result sheet like that where the beneficiary was either the PDP or Labour or anybody else. So it is one political party that has the ability to generate more votes than the total number of voters accredited. It's one political party that has the ability to achieve a 98.5% plus turnout, when everywhere else the turnout is below 25%. So let's call a spade a spade. Something is seriously wrong.
And obviously the reason we're talking about this, beyond, of course, the analysis that you've done of that election, is that that is clearly the most recent election in Nigeria, and therefore it remains newsworthy in terms of ongoing analysis of where Nigeria is heading in terms of the practice of improving its elections. So based on your assessment, Mr. Peterside, of that Edo State election, do you think it erodes or strengthens confidence in the electoral system heading towards 2027 and the next general election in this country?
Of course not. I've already said that INEC did very well in Osun State. All the results are still there. Go and look at them on INEC iRev. Since the presidential election, they started playing these funny games. I can even tell you what the game is. As soon as people finish voting, you start uploading results sometimes. Sometimes they claim there's a glitch. And it's always when it looks as if the favored party is not doing phenomenally well. They create a glitch. Even if they've loaded results up to a particular point, they suddenly stop, as happened in Edo, disappear for hours. And then later on, they resurface with obviously altered result sheets that changes the whole equation. So the point I'm making is that in terms of answering your question about confidence in INEC, if INEC was getting better in every election, you can say confidence is growing. This INEC is getting worse. I shudder to think what will happen next in Anambra.
Indeed. I mean, and again, I mean, I've talked with you a number of times on air about various elections that you have assessed. How does it make you feel with each election after that sort of thorough analysis and assessment, each time you detect these glaring anomalies? I mean, how does that make you feel?
You know, Charles, it raises the bigger question. People say, I'm a Democrat at heart. But for me, democracy means let the person who is most popular, that gets the most votes, win. If we cannot achieve that and allow the voters to decide, then we can as well have any other type of government. Because what's the difference? What's the difference between some civilians hijacking result sheets, altering them, pronouncing themselves winner, and INEC says go to court? What is actually the difference between somebody forcing his way into office with falsified result sheets versus somebody using a gun and saying he's a soldier? What is the difference? Tell me. For either side, they never got my consent. So I'm not calling for any particular action, but I'm just telling those doing this to be careful. If you completely erode and discountenance the so-called benefit from having an election where voters have a say, then we can as well finish up with a system where we don't waste money giving billions to INEC to conduct an election and let whoever is able just grab power and say, you know, I'm your boss. What's the difference?
And of course, we were just looking a moment ago there at some of those documents that you used as the basis of your research. Apologies that it came up a bit late, but you mentioned action. In terms of action, of course, the next thing, from what we understand, is that the PDP's Aswe Ighodalo is going to court to seek justice. I mean, do you have confidence that he'll get that justice? And beyond him, that Nigerians, the voters, will get that justice?
I will not say I have confidence, but I will say that it is not, I don't feel as hopeless about getting justice as I did under the previous Chief Justice of Nigeria. I don't have any evidence to believe that this new Chief Justice will be 10 times better. But you have to live in hope. Until somebody misbehaves, you have to believe in them. We have a new Chief Justice, so we've turned a new page. She has the right qualifications. She has the right pedigree. She comes from a good family. She also has tenure. Some of our past Chief Justices did not have tenure. They came in at 69, had a few months, and they were living at 70. So they could fool around, make some money, and go. In her own case, she has tenure. By the grace of God, she has at least a few years in office. I think Edo State will define her tenure. It's too easy. Any of us, I'm not a lawyer. I can sit down and dismiss all the evidence on various ground technicalities and all, and say, oh, let's just move on. Is she going to spend 3 years doing that or 4 years doing that? It's her call, but I think we should give her a chance. I will never condemn anybody that has just been put into a position of leadership. I will always give them a chance first. They are the ones to decide whether we should believe in them or not by their actions.
Of course, as you mentioned there is a new Chief Justice in office. I mean, you talked about the way to sort of measure the direction she's going to take the judiciary would be, for starters, the Edo State election. But I mean, beyond that, I mean, she's one person. Obviously, she's going to be leading the charge in terms of reforms. But, I mean, do you think at this point that someone who is not in power in this country can still get justice in Nigeria?
No, I don't want to prejudge the situation. Under the previous Chief Justice and some of his earlier colleagues, I felt that only those who are well connected could get justice. That's my personal opinion. I give each person a chance based on their pronouncements. This Chief Justice, if you ask most Nigerians about her past cases, I bet you 90% of them will remember her for the Imo State judgment. And that's the nature of life. You know, a doctor conducts 1,000 successful surgeries. If he kills one patient because he forgot the forceps in the stomach, that is the case everybody remembers. The beauty of life, like I put out in my tweet, is that she's in a unique position. Some people don't get a chance to make amends. And also, I'm experienced enough to know that you don't know the human being until you put them on top and make them a leader. Some people look good, you make them the leader, and you find they're terrible. Some people look not so good, make them the leader, and they will surprise you. Until the buck stops on somebody's table, you cannot fully hold them responsible. And I don't buy into this nonsense that it's only one person, you're only the CJ. If you're not going to help to make a place better than how you met it, then you can as well leave the office now. And that is across the board. It's not just about the judiciary. Even a company CEO, you enter a company with the intention of making it better. If you know you will leave it worse, or you will make it any better, you can as well vacate the office now. So I think we should hold people accountable from the point when they become the leader and the buck stops on their table, not before.
Well, you mentioned a company CEO there. Let's move in that direction and turn to an area that everyone acknowledges is your turf, and that's the economy. It's clearly, it's clear to everyone that prices are skyrocketing every day, whilst the country's income and that of most people is being depleted. The pace of job creation is slowing. I understand from some assessments to its lowest pace in decades, which is severely testing the tripwires in this country's of this country's youth. Meanwhile, everyone is screaming about fuel subsidy, which you advocated 5 years ago should be removed. That is now largely gone. Are you happy with the way things have turned out? I mean, I seem to recall that there was a second element to your call for the removal of subsidy, which seems to be missing, and is perhaps why there is so much pain.
Yes, I mean, look, some of us are consistent. You said I called for removal of fuel subsidy 5 years ago. I started calling for it even before 2012. I was on the economic team in 2012 when President Goodluck Jonathan tried to remove fuel subsidy. 5 years ago, I was the keynote speaker when the Nigerian Economic Summit Group was celebrating their 25th anniversary in Abuja. I was made the keynote speaker at the dinner for the 25th anniversary, and I explained that the big difference between now and then, when I say now, 2019 to 2024 versus 2012, is that now it's possible to remove a subsidy from the wealthy people or remove a subsidy from everybody, and then you give cash transfers to the poor. So what am I saying? It's inefficient to subsidize even the wealthiest people in Nigeria, giving them cheap fuel. So the solution I was advocating is that remove the subsidy, and from some of the revenues you've gotten, indeed, by making the very rich who consume the most and everybody pays the full price, then you give cash transfers to the poor. And I made the point that now we have a more developed financial system with fintechs and mobile phones and the whole lot, where it becomes possible for you to give cash transfers. So in effect, for the poorest of the poor, they are still being subsidized. But they're being subsidized by paying the full price for petrol and then receiving some cash from the government. And that cash will not be given to them by NNPC. The problem with trying to subsidize the petrol price for everybody is that even the billionaires are being subsidized and they consume more of the petrol, indeed 20, 30 times more with their fleet of cars and everything else. So I'm saying remove the subsidy, make everybody pay a market price based on at least full cost recovery, and then give cash transfers to the poor. Don't give cash transfers to the rich. So effectively you're subsidizing the poor, but by giving them cash. They can either use the cash to feed themselves or use the cash to add to what they have to buy petrol or kerosene. And I will explain that the reason the subsidy, the conventional way, dispensed at the petrol pump is so expensive is that you end up subsidizing not only the richest people, even your neighbors, and then you get involved in products being billed to the nation, which probably were never consumed. All that stops with my recommendation, which is go for a market price, remove the subsidy, and then pay cash to the poor. How do neighboring countries come and get some of that cash for the poor? Almost impossible. You have to go to your LGA with your NIN and whatever, and you get paid. Or indeed, the LGA where you're a resident. So you can actually subsidize the poor by making sure that they are identifiable now based on their NIN, national ID card and all that, which is the payment instrument. So we have to move, but you see, what the government did, and I don't blame the technocrats, because it sounds as if the government removed the subsidy in a hurry. So they never got a chance to discuss things like what I was advocating, which is to simultaneously beef up cash transfers, and not selective cash transfers to a few people. I'm talking about where every poor person in the country that has a NIN, if they don't receive some cash, it's because they failed to go and get a NIN, and they can still go and get their NIN now to qualify for a cash transfer.
Well, that
would have alleviated the pain for the poorest of the poor.
Right. That's illuminating analysis. And just staying with the economy and also making reference to that keynote address that you delivered to the NESG in 2019, you were complaining bitterly about Nigeria's inflation rate, which stood at about 11% in 1993, and you wanted it brought down to about 5%. I mean, I wonder what your reaction is to where it stands today at more than 30%.
Yeah, I mean, I know how we got here, and I'm somebody who believes in being fair. It is not true that this government inherited low inflation and took it to the sky. The government inherited inflation that was already in the high teens, but they inherited it against the background where the exchange rate was being manipulated via a crazy multiple exchange rate system. So when you make that adjustment and allow the exchange rates to be market-driven, there was always going to be an initial hump in inflation. So what you are required to do as the manager of the economy is to take all the necessary actions to quickly bring down the inflation. So in effect, what I'm saying is that the initial sharp rise in inflation was expected, and then your priority is to bring down inflation as fast as you can by doing all the right things. On the monetary side, most of which have been done. But I think the reforms should be more holistic than they are. It's not enough to just have market-determined exchange rates, remove subsidy, and go home. If you do that, there'll be phenomenal pain, and you may not get the desired results that you're looking for, even in terms of macroeconomic stability and in terms of growth. There are many other aspects of a broad reform that are not being pursued with the same seriousness. So that on the fiscal side, why do we have a budget when all kinds of legislators throw in phantom projects into agencies which they are going to go back and collect? All that stuff should be wiped out by a stern president. Call them into your house and tell them, we cannot inflict pain on people and be fooling around, giving you billions to go and do what you like with.